Good morning, Las Kim Corley. Statements on Europe Day, a day celebrating peace and unity. I'm going to echo that, a day celebrating peace and unity, given all that's going on in the world and all that we've seen in their TV screens and all that's been experienced by the people of Palestine, not only over the last 24 hours or the last week, but for many, many decades. We should be cognizant of talking about how we celebrate a day of peace and unity. Well, 27 people were killed last night, including 9 children. But I'll talk about Europe. Europe is often talked about as a peace project, and it has been. It's been in many ways, it's been a very successful peace project. I am somebody who considers myself, in addition to being a very proud Dub, a very proud Irish person, I'm a very proud European. And I believe that Europe, as on the whole, been very good for Ireland. When we joined in 1973, Ireland was a predominantly agrarian society, more connected to the 19th century than we were to the 20th. And from 1923 onwards, we accelerated ourselves more into the 21st century and left many of our neighbours and contemporaries in Europe far, far behind in terms of the type of society that we have created here that is modern, forward-thinking, progressive, outward-looking. There have been standout moments in terms of our relationship with the European Union. Most important for me and for all of us here who value our peace on this island was the support and the solidarity that was given to us and the Irish people throughout their lead up to the Good Friday Agreement. That will live long in memory, and while that peace is still very much a process, this somewhat stability we have on this island is a recognition of that contribution. Also, in terms of the last 24 months, in terms of Ireland's pathway towards withdrawal negotiations and engagement in the withdrawal negotiations as Britain sought to leave the European Union, there was an old saying in international diplomacy that the strong will do what they will the weak suffer what we must. And I think it's fair to say that during their negotiations, during the withdrawal negotiations, Ireland's certainly position wasn't weak. We were able to stare our neighbours in the eye confidently and more strongly, I would argue, and that was due to our relationship with the European Union. The Taoiseach said that Europe isn't perfect. It is far, far from perfect. The poverty rate in the European Union of those at risk of poverty or social exclusion stands at 21%. Poverty is the greatest threat to the European Union. I'll echo that again. Poverty is the greatest threat to the European Union. When I walk along where we are at the moment, in the heart of what was once and still is to some degree, but not the same way as I remember Dublin Stocklands, I think about kind of when I used to travel with my family on holidays to Puelly, where we'd often go through Holyhead. I often take the ferry and head over to Holyhead, and Holyhead's a place that I have lots of great memories of. It was only in later years that I learned that statistically Holyhead in the province of Anglesey, where it's located, is statistically the poorest part of the United Kingdom, where 22% of the children born in Anglesey and Holyhead are at risk of or in poverty. The people of Holyhead chose to vote in favour of Brexit, despite the fact that they were entirely dependent upon the trades and the exports for their very livelihoods. They still chose Brexit and a shot into the unknown, because the reality of a European Union had moved towards economic principles that were, they felt, and strongly, and many would agree, strongly against their interests, a shot in the dark was better than the reality of what they were experiencing. Poverty for me is the greatest threat to the European Union, and the European Union has too often turned its back on the real life experiences of those who resided within its borders. A fruit of that poison orchard for me is what's seen in the rise of the far right, people manipulating communities who have been to the fore of collectivism, telling them that other people were the cause of their ills, while being backed up by powerful forces within the European Union, is a poisoned fruit of that orchard. But I totally and utterly refuse to accept that the same communities who are always to the forefront of embracing collectivism, who have been the ones who were the first in terms of accepting diversity and welcoming in people from foreign shores, be they fleeing persecution or simply looking to build a better life for their families, are the ones who have been advancing this hatred within the European Union. Far from it. It's people in positions of power and influence, people such as Orban in Hungary, or those in Poland who have been accommodated to some degree in terms of their very far-right principles, in terms of the denigration of LGBT plus communities, in terms of their trying to lobby to remove gender equality from European Union statements. We must condemn and confront the far-right wherever they be it on the streets or in European parliaments, or in be on the streets or in European parliaments. They must be confronted. I don't have long left, so I do want to echo sentiments that have already been expressed. European Day celebrating peace and unity. There can be absolutely no peace or unity if the European Union refuses to take its position of strength in calling what is happening in Israel and Jerusalem and in the occupied territories exactly what it is. It is an annexation, and it needs to be called that. Otherwise, the European Union claim to be a union built on peace and unity it's a fraud. If we cannot put a fortress around your own peace and unity and say, aren't we great, and commend ourselves on it on May 9th every year, while people in Israel and people in occupied territories in Palestine are being bombed. In the Gaza Strip, the median age of the population is 17 years and 7 months. When the government of Israel chooses to drop bombs there, they are going to willingly kill children. If the European Union and Ireland as a member are not willing to call that out and stand forward against that injustice in the strongest terms, well, then we render the very purpose of this union to be obsolete. So my final call today is for our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Taoiseach, it's here shortly, to take the strongest line in terms of calling this annexation for what it is, to use in their power, our position and their influence to condemn in its fullest terms the government of Israel for its treatment of the Palestinian people, and say no more, and draw a line on their stand and demonstrate a bit of fortitude in this area.